Awesome. So, hi everyone, and welcome to our talk, Design Systems Before You Begin. And before we begin, can I just get a show of hands to see how many devs we've got in the room?
And how about designers? Okay,
More of you.
Looks like I win.
So, a bit of an introduction. My name's James. I'm a co-founder and lead developer at Thought and Function.
And confusingly, I'm also called James, but I'm a product designer at WildE.
And we know it's a bit confusing. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've color coordinated ourselves with the slides. So I'm developer James, and I'm represented by yellow.
And I'm designer James, represented by this lovely shade of purple. We're both consultants and design system advocates. We've previously worked together at a healthcare startup where we helped to implement a design system and where we headed up the visual design and engineering respectively. And we did this with very little personnel, no real prior knowledge, and actually well over a year ago, at a time when information and resource around design systems wasn't as readily available as it is today. And I think it's fair to say that this was an invaluable and steep learning curve for both of us. There was a lot of trial and error involved, and this is kind of what proved to be the catalyst for today's talk. Because we started thinking, what would we do differently next time? And what did we wish that we'd known before we began even? And that brings us on to today's talk, which I suppose is really aimed at anybody who may well be thinking of establishing a design system or who may well have just begun the process of establishing one. Because we're going to cover the best ways that we found to prepare yourself as an individual, as a team, and as an organization for a design system. And most importantly, we'll cover the key questions that you need to answer before you begin. So we're going to assume that most of you are familiar with the basics of design systems, but bear with us because we just want to touch on them very briefly. Because you may have noticed that design systems are literally everywhere and that everybody seems to have one. They even have entire conferences dedicated to them now. And it's really not hard to see why, right? Particularly when you look at the benefits they can offer. So obviously, from a design perspective, they allow you to design at scale, which means that you can deliver a consistent branded experience across multiple products. They allow you to establish a collection of tried and tested UI components so that you can design and iterate really quickly. And then through the usage of things like design tokens, they allow you to actually change the entire look and feel of a product at will.
In terms of engineering benefits, a design system really just reduces the amount of code that you have to write and help you scale front-end development. Because if you have multiple applications across your organization, there's multiple front ends to be built, and that's typically built by different teams, which can take up a lot of resources and is also very prone to inconsistencies. So with the design system, you can now leverage off all of the components within one centralized repository and get all of the cool features and updates automatically across all of your applications. An example for us was when we had to conform to AAA accessibility standards. So as a healthcare startup, that was quite important for us. And we did this by making sure that the design system components were all built conforming to the standards. We added a test to them, and that gave us some confidence in that all of our applications conform to the standards. So there's also some cross-discipline benefits as well. A design system helps you improve communication because there's just more interactions baked into the process between developers, designers, and product owners. A design system really encourages and nurtures a culture of writing good documentation. So if you have any knowledge silos, that can help you remove that. And it also improves consistency, not just in the way that your application looks and feels, but also in the way that your users interact with it as well.
And this all sounds great, like when do we start building one? But there's actually a couple of difficult questions that you need to ask yourself first, right? Because building a design system is not a straightforward task. And it's important to always remember that a design system is obviously, a living funded product with a roadmap and backlog that serves as part of a broader ecosystem. And therefore, it's key to see it not so much as an end solution, but as a continuous approach. A design system will ultimately change the way your company works and thinks. So it's really important to consider if you're even ready for that level of change. Or to put it another way, a design system is for life, not just for Christmas. It's a sizable commitment. So how do you know if you're ready for a design system? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are actually two big questions that you need to answer. Firstly, do you even need a design system? And secondly, is your organization actually ready for one? So let's take a closer look at that first question. Do you even need a design system? And I want to start just by throwing up a word of warning to anybody who's thinking of implementing a design system because they're new and shiny and a great buzzword. Please don't do that. Instead, ask yourself, what are the problems that you're trying to solve by implementing that design system? Do you have an inconsistent look and feel across multiple products that you want to unify? Do you even have multiple products that could really benefit from a design system? And think about your future roadmap. You might only have one product now, but there may be more lined up in the future. Or you could just have a disconnect between engineering and design. And if you have any of these problems, then great. A design system could be an excellent solution to them.
So you know that you need a design system. The next question to ask is, are you ready for one? So how do we know if we're ready or not? So I think it can be determined by 3 factors: the amount of resources you have available to you, the amount of business buy-in, and also the skills that you have available to you. So starting with resources, I just want to talk about some of the challenges that we faced. So the first challenge was estimating the initial delivery for the component library, because if you have an active roadmap, you've got new designs being created, and therefore new components are constantly being added into your design system, which meant that your initial goalpost is constantly moving forwards and away from you. So let's just assume that you built your initial set of components and you're ready to replace your existing application with your new application using your shiny new components. We bump into a very similar problem because with an active roadmap, you've got new features being introduced, and now these features have to be built twice as well, both in the old and the new application, so duplicating our efforts. So an alternative way is to pause our current roadmap and focus our efforts on the design system. That means we build the features once, but the problem is that you pause your roadmap, so you can't create any releases until you've reached parity with your second version. So in both of these scenarios, I think it's fair to say that we're going to need extra resources and extra time, which brings me to my second point, business buy-in. So I think it's really important to involve all of the senior stakeholders in the decision-making process when going for a design system, because as advocates, we often talk about all of the kind of benefits. And even though there's a lot of benefits like the ones we mentioned, there's also some short-term constraints. So it's really our responsibility to educate the business so that they can make an informed decision. And the third factor to determine whether you're ready is the skills that you have in your team. So aside from having great developers and designers, you'll need ones who can make particular decisions, which I'll be covering later. You need a knowledge of testing frameworks and a culture of writing tests. You need to build a documentation website and also some DevOps experience to help you automate some of the processes around versioning, deployments, and QA.
Okay, so let's say that you've established that you do actually need a design system and that your organization is actually ready for one. The next thing you're going to want to focus on is the ownership structure around that design system. Because the ownership of your design system is massively important. Poor ownership can lead to disagreements over the direction of the design system. It can result in incorrect additions being made to the design system and inconsistent processes being established around it, as well as valuable knowledge becoming siloed. So at first, we actually implemented a small centralized design system team who basically owned and produced everything. But we quickly realized this wasn't working. It was siloing knowledge and causing a bottleneck. We had multiple applications with multiple work streams and different deadlines. And so having this centralized design system team quickly created this dependency bottleneck. It would make estimating how long things would take pretty much impossible because everybody was so dependent on one team. So how do you structure the ownership of your design system? Well, we found that a design system needs to be treated similarly to an open source project within your organization, one that harnesses knowledge from across your different teams. And it's important that all members of the design and engineering teams feel that they can contribute an addition or an edit to the design system. And because your design system should be constantly being reviewed and constantly be evolving, everything should be up for grabs. And this open source style approach means that you can actually identify any needed or incorrect components early on. It means that you're actually building a more robust design system using the knowledge from within your teams. And it helps to foster an environment of universal ownership, thereby increasing the likelihood of the design system's adoption. However, it is worth noting that this kind of large-scale collaboration can obviously massively slow down work. It can become a platform for disagreement, and it just isn't scalable. So how do you overcome these issues?
So like any open source project, even though everyone can contribute towards it, which is awesome, we still need some kind of core ownership to help with governance and also coordinate things. So we will encounter challenges and be faced with pretty difficult decisions as well along the process. So we really need a team that is determined enough to work through these and keep going and keep improving the design system. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce the Design System Council. So this is a team that's made up of a designer, developer, and product owner who's ultimately responsible for the design system, combined with various lead engineers and designers from all of your other products across your organization. And this collection of talent has a few key responsibilities. So they're there to help coordinate updates and releases, identify any and eliminate any duplications or inconsistencies earlier on in the process, manage the roadmap of the actual design system project, and also manage the infrastructure and technology of the core system. And in order to fulfill these kind of responsibilities, we need some new events to be integrated into our current process. For us, that was done in the form of design reviews and knowledge sharing sessions. So why do we need design reviews? So when the new designs are created, there's a few questions that we need to answer. We need to decide whether the components should be built into the design system or can they just be built into the products themselves. Maybe there's existing components that can already do the job, or maybe you have multiple teams that want similar functionality, but you need a team to coordinate this change. So the Design System Council really needs an opportunity to review the designs and answer these questions so that when we get to something like a sprint planning session, the devs already know what their solution they're going for. And in terms of knowledge sharing sessions, if we think of the design system as a set of tools, earlier, we need to know what they are and how to use them. So it's really up to the Design System Council to advocate for the whole system and educate the business on it so that they can use all the components. So we found some pretty good ways to share the knowledge, and that's over brown bag sessions, regular monthly demos, but most importantly, keeping an up-to-date documentation website as the single source of truth.
So we talked pretty in depth, and I think it's worth just taking a moment to reflect on some of those key considerations for those of you about to begin a design system. So first off, obviously, make sure there is an understanding within your organization of the true value of a design system that exists beyond just the buzzword, but also that your organization is aware of the long-term commitment and drain a design system can have on resources. Secondly, understand just how much of an impact a design system will make on your roadmap and workflow. And finally, understand the potential bottleneck that a centralized team can cause if you're dealing with multiple products. Be aware of alternative ownership structures. Something like a design system council worked really well for us, but it may be totally different for you. And ultimately, we know that it's easy to be blindsided by all the positives a design system can offer because, frankly, they're awesome. But before you do dive headfirst into one, it's really important that you ask yourself the following as an individual, a team, and an organization. Do you currently have issues that a design system can really help with? Does your organization really understand all the benefits and the drawbacks of implementing a design system? Does your team actually have the time and resources required for one? And further to that, do they actually have the skill set to establish, deliver, and maintain a design system in the future? And only really if the answer is yes to all of these, are you actually ready to begin?
So how did it work out for us? Well, thanks to our very talented team, some of which are sat over there, we're able to establish and maintain our design system, which is actively being used today.
If you're interested in talking to either of us about design systems or anything else, then obviously feel free to get in touch with us or just come and grab us later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.